Hello, and welcome to the Shipwreck Archive.
Thank you. Would you happen to have the two brothers of cursed Captain Pollard?
Here we are. Enjoy.
The two brothers brought the survivors home, and Captain Pollard walked quietly home through the curious and staring crowd until he reached his house. He could be excused from not wanting to answer any questions about what he had faced. Almost all the town already knew what he and the rest of the men who had survived the wreck of the whaleship Essex had been forced to resort to. The two ships' boats that were all that survived of the Essex had been separated, one under Captain Pollard and one under the first mate, Chase. Neither boat had had an easy time of it, and their tales of survival had gripped the public. Almost as soon as he got home, the first mate, Chase, immediately started writing his account of the wreck, which met with great success when published. The idea of a whaling ship sank by the very whale that it had been hunting was one that sparked the imagination. A couple of decades later, it would inspire Melville to write Moby Dick, but for now it was a matter of great public curiosity. Everyone wanted to see the whaling captain who had eaten his own cousin to survive. Though it was known that it was a matter of desperate survival, and it was not the first time something like this had occurred, it was one thing to hear about it, and another to know someone who had been driven to such an extreme. Many people must have thought that the men who had endured such horrors would swear off the sea, or at least never set foot on a whaling vessel again. It was, therefore, a cause of comment when it was learned that Captain Pollard was to be the captain of the very ship that had returned him home, the two brothers. Not only was Captain Pollard returning to the sea on a whaling ship, but joining him were another two survivors of the Essex, the cabin boy Thomas Nickerson, now promoted to boat steerer for this voyage, and crew member Charles Ramsdell. Thomas Nickerson had been on the boat commanded by Chase and rescued first. Charles Ramsdell had been the lone other survivor on the boat Captain Pollard had been captain of. The people of Nantucket had strong ties to the sea, especially the whaling trade, and the inherent danger of it was well known, and apparently it did not cause them hesitation. The Two Brothers was a smaller vessel than the Essex had been, only 220 tons, but she sailed in consort with the Martha, another whaling ship. Their voyage was uneventful down to the waters around Hawaii, and it seemed as though Captain Pollard had been correct that lightning did not strike twice. It was not until February 11th, 1823, that Captain Pollard would earn his reputation as cursed. The storm that blew in was not enough to endanger either the two brothers or the Martha, but it was strong enough to separate them. It was also enough to make it hard to see the dangers ahead of them. Thomas Nickerson was just stepping out onto the deck in the gale when there was a thud that reverberated through the entire ship. His first thought was that they had struck another ship, except that Captain Pollard was looking down into the water in horror. What they had struck was an uncharted reef that had punctured a hole in their ship. With the gale still raging, and water now rushing in, it was very clear that they were going to have to abandon ship. Just as the Essex before, the mates and men sprang into action, preparing lifeboats and getting ready for an orderly evacuation. Captain Pollard was not prepared for such an ordeal again, however. As the men got everything ready to leave the ship, he just stared in horror down at the angry seas and the reef below them. It was a mesmerization that was hard to break. As they prepared the boats to launch, the men began to call for Captain Pollard to join them, but he was not immediately prepared to do so. It was only at the very last minute, and with all of his men shouting for him to join them, that Captain Pollard could be compelled to join his men in the small boats and leave the stricken two brothers. If Captain Pollard had thought that he was going to relive the horrors of survival on small boats for months at a time, he was certainly relieved when they found the Martha safely afloat the next day and were immediately pulled on board. Captain Pollard and his men had spent a miserable night being thrown around by the storm in their small boats, clinging to the gunwales so that they would not be tossed out, but they were still alive. Captain Pollard would sail one more time as the captain of a merchant ship, but his career on the sea was effectively over. No one would trust a man who had lost 2 ships in a row and in such dramatic circumstances with their vessel, even if you could find sailors who were willing to sail with him, which was unlikely. The man was clearly bad luck on a ship, and sailing was dangerous enough without adding someone who was clearly a Jonah to be the captain. People had been willing to think that the Essex was a one-time event, a moment of poor luck, but 2 ships in a row clearly had something more sinister going on. Life on shore was not easy for Captain Pollard either, though. For the most part, people stayed away from him. While the other men who had been on the Essex were welcomed back, people shuddered a little more at the man who had eaten his own cousin. His cousin's mother could not even stand to see him. He had promised her that he would look after her son. He was not easily forgiven. In the end, Captain Pollard would become the night watchman of the town, a quiet and lonely occupation that perhaps suited him best now. He never forgot about the men who had been lost on the Essex, and on the anniversary of the ship's sinking, he would lock himself in his room and fast all day in their memory. Years later, after the publishing of Moby Dick, Melville would meet Captain Pollard, and he found him a remarkable man. But he did not dare bring up the wreck that so clearly haunted the man before him. The most detailed personal account Captain Pollard would ever give of the events of the Essex was immediately after he was rescued, to a table with other ship captains and a missionary. It was almost a confessional or therapeutic moment for the haunted captain, but once he unburdened himself once, he did not seem inclined to do again. The men who he had told his story to had been horrified by his accounts, and perhaps Captain Pollard learned to keep his story to himself. Ramsdell, the man who had also survived on the boat he was on, also never published an account of what occurred. It was hard to speak of themselves being reduced to living on the marrow in human bones. Chase, Ramsdell, and Nickerson all were later to become captains in their own right. Thomas Nickerson retired to run a boarding house with his wife at the end of his sea career, and it was only then that he was convinced that his version of the events of the Essex and his survival might be of interest to the public. He also wrote of the 2 brothers, and told of how Captain Pollard froze in the face of another shipwreck. Though publication of his account was very delayed, it is now considered equal, if not better, than Chase's telling of the horrors that they faced at sea. In the shadow of the horrors of the Essex, the wreck of the 2 brothers was quickly forgotten, except as an example of why no one should ever give Captain Pollard command of a ship again. No one cared to note the exact place she sank, or salvage from her. She was just a small whaling ship. There was little of value. The 2 brothers' wreck was found in 2008, making it the first Nantucket whaler to be discovered. Archaeologists were able to find out where she had sank thanks to first-hand accounts like the ones written by Nickerson, and after initially finding her anchor, more artifacts soon followed. The wreck was swiftly added to the Register of Historic Places, ensuring that it would be protected. Unfortunately for the memory of Captain Pollard, what will always add significance to this wreck is not that it is a 180-year whaling vessel, but rather its ties to the Essex disaster. It seems that every aspect of Captain Pollard's life is doomed to be tied to his ill fate, even after his death, only cementing his bad luck. Please see Wreck of the Whaleship Essex by Owen Chase for the first mate's first-hand account of the events of Essex sinking and his survival with Nickerson, and see the sources in the description for more information on the 2 brothers. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for visiting the Shipwreck Archives. See you soon.